you have any questions, like as a new person to Home Assistant, is there anything that's like puzzling you at the moment that Rohan and I could point you in the right direction?
What would you guys typically use? So both of you, I'm under the assumption that both of you guys use Node-RED.
I do.
You do
Phil
not?
does not.
Phil does not.
I'm pure YAML, to be honest. I'm a developer, so I prefer code.
Okay. So for Rohan, do you think, what is an instance where you would choose Node-RED over just YAML coding?
I've actually moved pretty much all of my automations over to Node-RED. And essentially, if it's right now, I'm at the point where I really like the debug capabilities in Node-RED. I really like the drag and drop kind of visual. I'm unlike Phil, I'm not a developer. I'm more of a visual kind of person, and you kind of see how it steps through. Like when you run an automation, you get the status of, hey, this was hit, and then this was hit, and that step view, which now I know there's a lot of that built into the native automation editor in the Home Assistant UI. Which ironically released I think a week after I moved everything to Node-RED. Mm-hmm. So, but overall, I'm pretty much Node-RED first at this point.
Wow.
And there's actually some really neat things that I do as well. So there's some, again, there's some products out there that, like, even from an MQTT perspective, I actually run 2 MQTT servers, one at my house and one not. Mm-hmm. So if there's something that I want to rate limit, as an example, I send it to my one that's not at my house, and then essentially Node-RED reads that, it rate limits it, and then sends it to my house here, right, into MQTT. So as an example, so it lets you do some other stuff that I wouldn't normally do through Home Assistant, mm-hmm. Easily, if that makes sense. There's some where Node-RED gets kind of complex is when you start to do things like, again, you can put in what they call it functions, right? And essentially it's little bits of JavaScript in there. So it is powerful if you want to do those kind of things, but realistically, a lot of people have made a whole bunch of different types of nodes, which is what they call them, with just a little bubbles that you drag in. So yeah, I mean, realistically, you can do a lot outside of Node-RED even without Home Assistant, right? So I obviously pull in a lot. Node-RED, when you integrate it with Home Assistant, you'll pull in a lot of these entities in from Home Assistant and everything, and then based on different things, you could build it, right? To me, it's just a lot easier to visualize, because I'm like, oh, what am I trying to do? Am I trying to do this trigger? Am I trying to do based on, X, Y, Z parameters? And it's all right there. And I'm like, oh, right, this is what I'm trying to do. So just the way my brain is wired, it just helps me build automations faster. And I can always kind of access them from Node-RED there. And like I said, stepping through things is very nice and easy in Node-RED. Mm-hmm. And you can build debug points in kind of wherever you want.
I've got also just a silly question, like a very beginner question that I never really looked up. The ESP Home and Home Assistant, are they both, how are they related to Nabucasa?
So I think we had one of our very early episodes, the original creator of ESP Home, Otto, on the podcast. Yeah. This was when he just, I think he was creating
things in high school.
Yeah, he was still in high school. It was crazy, right?
Oh, yeah.
And he was like, I'm creating things on ESP board, and I just created this like sort of a wrapper to, do the hard work, of installing all this like stuff, right, and made it extensible. I think Otto then sort of got busy, needed to go, basically, life takes over, and the ESP Home project was sort of not getting as much love as he could give it, right? Because life was too hard for him. So Nabucasa actually acquired ESP Home. So they completely own. Well, I say own, it is still an open source project, but Nabucasa now has the maintenance rights of that project. So Nabucasa pays for developers to actively develop ESP Home, similar to the way Nabucasa pays for staff to actively run the Home Assistant.
Yeah. They essentially oversee and maintain.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Okay. So go get your cloud subscriptions.
Exactly. Yep.
So you're actually helping two projects, right? Both ESP Home and Home Assistant.
I think
And
it's a win-win.
ZWebJS and a few other things as well. Like it's not just Home Assistant, right? It's fantastic, right? Like the more people that support Navicaster, the bigger the Open Home gets.
Yep.
And the one thing that's amazed me so far with only a couple months into Home Assistant is how much stuff gets done. Like, you know how many things in my life get updates and, it's like a small bug fix and that's it. A Home Assistant every single month adds integrations. It talks about all the breaking, as you guys talk about in your podcast, your monthly podcast. But I mean, it's just, there's so much to it and they're doing so much work for it. I mean, the January update seemed like that was already a lot. And that was a smaller, everyone was on vacation kind of mention.
Yeah. Well, I think it's number 1 or number 2 active open source repository on GitHub, right? Like,
that's incredible.
Yeah. It's crazy though. I think 6, maybe 7 years of using it later, it still wows me. Like, hey, it's cool that we're still throwing these many updates in per release, right? Like, so
yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like it's also like snowballed a little bit, right? Like, might have to go back and listen to our like very early episodes to see like how many updates and stuff like that there were. But now I feel like when we started this podcast, when like it was like, you'd have a bunch of updates. We're like, whoa, this is a big one. And I feel like relatively now it's a small one, right? Just in terms of what we've kind of come up with. So it's actually even growing faster, in my opinion, at least. That's at least what I think. I might be wrong, but.
Well, the breaking changes certainly got less because of the move to removing things out of YAML. We would have whole episodes, right? Like, okay, this is going to be a big one. This is going to be a big one just for breaking changes. But now that we've got through that pain, it's sort of the changes that you're seeing now are not breaking changes. They are actual moving the product forward.
Yeah, which is nice.
As a remark for all of the people starting Home Assistant, I would say the 2 first things that I would recommend as a fellow beginner. 1, Hacks is huge. I don't know. Oh yeah. Hacks, install Hacks. It's beautiful. I mean, it makes it so easy. You can scan. I mean, it gives you a list of all the custom integrations that are already listed on Hacks, and you just sometimes it's manual install, but most of the time it's just a one-click kind of solution, and Home Assistant restarts, and you're good. The second thing is, I got very lucky that I didn't have to worry about backups for a little bit. I never had an OS breaking issue, but I know IT enough that you should have very proper backup setup. I currently there's an integration on Hacks, I'm pretty sure, that links it with a Google Drive, and it just backs up all of your Home Assistant backups daily, or whatever the interval you want it to be, to Google Drive, and it's super easy to set up, and that's irreplaceable. I haven't had a breaking fix, cross my fingers, so far, but in the event that I do, I know I'll be covered now because I have that.
Yeah, definitely backups.
Even
the backups
even the native
now,
backup has gotten really good. Yeah,
I was going to say, like, the native backups are also now available, because for ages they were only available if you used the Home Assistant OS. Now, even if you're just running the Home Assistant container, the core container, you have access to native backups. It's in your UI. Enable it, and then, as Dean said, just go in, enable one of the community add-ons, and you can then push those backups into Google Drive. I run mine through Duplicati, which is another Docker container that runs backups for me. So every 2 days or something, it will go up and push my Home Assistant backups up to an FTP or OneDrive, where I've linked it up to, and then I can recover it that way if I need to. But yeah, definitely the rollback mechanism with the native backup is definitely useful.